Hello and welcome to another live coaching, March 20th. How are you doing? Did you sail this week? If you did, how was it? I've been sailing. Maui's been good. Hokipa's been good. What's gone on in my week? Yeah, we had some good conditions on Maui. I've been doing some coaching. And hey, Dom Dom, I've been doing some bit of coaching on Maui, some one-on-one coaching, getting in the water myself as well, some good sessions. I did some filming yesterday. So I set up the Insta360 on the harness mount. So the harness mount, company harness mount. And it was my first time using that setup. And it felt good. It felt really good. Felt like everything was stiff and working. And then the stick fell off the mount, the carbon stick, and I lost my camera. So I lost the carbon stick and I lost the camera, lost the memory card. So I don't have any of that footage. After that happened, I threw on some goggles and flippers and tried to find it, some fins, but I could not find it. So footage is gone, camera is gone. Oh well. Hey, Samuel, Rasmus, Mark, Henry. Good morning, everyone. We've got a lot of good topics today. One of the big topics that's going to come up is competition. There are some competitions that some of the group members want to participate in, and I think it's a very interesting topic to talk about. Hey, Hans. Good to hear that you're back on the water. Hey, Caro. How was it on the water? Sounds like, oh, cool. Did you land the back loops? That sounds wonderful. All right. Yeah, good to hear that you guys in Europe are getting some sailing. All right. I'm going to jump in to the Facebook group. As always, say hi in the chat. Let me know if you sailed or not. I'm not putting these banners right now because I had some feedback that some of you guys want to watch the live stream with subtitles and then the banners get in the way of that. So I'm experimenting with not putting the banners up. Hey, John, good to see you. Rich. Samuel, how was the GoPro? All right, I'm going to load up the Facebook group. All right, here we are. So let's get into the coaching. As always, you guys know the drill. You guys are a bunch of regulars. If you've got any questions, interrupt me. You know how it works. All right. Nice, Carl. I'm happy to hear about that progress. Morning, Greg. Cool. That sounds like a good session. All right, so let's get into it. Rasmus. All right, so let's see. So this is a post from Mark about the first competition in a long while in the UK. Hey, Mika. So yeah, we're going to talk about competitions. There's another thread somewhere. So we're definitely going to talk about competitions. I think there's some good advice in here as well. Phil is saying, have fun and have a fully powered sail. Very much agree with that. More on it later. Alex is saying, treat it as an experience. Don't put the pressure on yourself to win. Definitely a good point. And if it's your first contest, you're probably not going to win. Competition sailing is difficult, and having that humility and expectation can help you have a more enjoyable time while you do it. It's very important to wear a watch so that you know the schedule, flags and timing and everything else. And make sure that you fulfill the requirements from the judges. So if it's 2 waves and 2 jumps, you need to make sure you have at least 2 waves and 2 jumps done. So that's all good advice. Malcolm is saying to sail powered up. Definitely. Definitely true. Um, all right. All right. So Andy asks, I hope the way in which I'm asking this question translates well for answers. I surf and have several boards that I ride in a variety of conditions and wave time. Each board design allows for a certain approach to riding a wave. The surfboard brand and shapers craft boards to work well on certain wave faces and for their riders, and usually have multiple tens of boards in their range. In windsurfing, we seem to limited in the boards we get from the brand, such as 3 types and the way they work. I've got back into the sport about 6 years ago and have ridden a few shapes, but all shapes have a limiting factor. I'm now at the point where I'm struggling to find boards that give a sense of surfing. Why doesn't the sport more like surfing? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Hey, Ragnar and Axel, welcome to the stream. Basically, Andy, the short answer is economics. That windsurf boards are more expensive than surfboards. Surfboards are getting more expensive now, but especially a few years ago, a windsurf board was over 2,000 and a surfboard was like 500. Now surfboards are getting closer to 1,000, and windsurf boards are, 2,500, or they're somewhere a bit over 2,000 for a new board. And so it's just not as easy to have a lot of different boards. But the other issue is the production. So the production of windsurfing boards, one, is more costly than a normal surfboard. So the boards take more materials. The molding process is different than production surfboards. And what I've heard is that a brand needs to sell 70 boards from each size in order to pay the production costs. And so that might not sound like a big number, 70 boards, but if you do the math, okay, a brand, they have 3 different, like you're saying, okay, maybe a brand has 3 different wave boards. And in each of those 3 models, maybe there's 4 different sizes, which maybe there's even more than 4 sizes, right? Most brands have like a 76, an 82, an 88, a 96, and maybe 100. So maybe it's even 5 sizes. So let's say that's 15. Let's say it's 15 different boards across their wavelength. If they have line 5 for each size, so then they've got to sell over 1,050 wave boards just to cover the cost of the production. That doesn't cover the cost of R&D. It doesn't cover the cost of marketing. It doesn't cover any other costs associated with the brand, just to cover the production mold costs for that line. And 1,000 boards is a lot of boards to sell. So you can see that the economics are just not there for the brands to have a lot of boards. If the market were bigger, if brands were selling hundreds of thousands of boards instead of, maybe just a few thousand boards, then yeah, it would be a different story. But if for riders that have the opportunity, and I count myself as one of those lucky people, you can get boards that are specific for your conditions. And so I get a set of production boards from Taboo, and I use those. I really like those boards, and I was involved in the development of them as well. And I use those all around Europe, and I really like them, and they work great. But there are certain waves where I need something more specialized. So like Hokipa, for example, I'm getting a lot of specific Hokipa boards and experimenting with different things, with longer outlines, asymmetric outlines, different bottom shapes, sometimes shorter boards for something more playful. And yeah, so you can do a lot with a custom shaper. So if you have the budget, and I would look for a custom shaper and try and get a custom board, see how it feels. If you don't have the budget, or there isn't a custom shaper near you, there's still a lot you can do to customize your waveboard. One of the first things to do is play with the fins. Fins can change a board so much. So if you experiment with the fins, you can really make the board feel like a completely different board. Go softer, go stiffer. Softer fin will make the board grip more. It might slow it down a little bit in a straight line. A stiffer fin might quicken it in a straight line. It'll go a little bit faster, but it'll slide more. There's a lot you can do with the setup on the board with the fins, the foot straps, the mast base. Something I've been doing as well, because I have some boards, like I've been pushed onto my backup boards because, my favorite boards I took to Capo Verde, they got kind of broken up there in the event because we were competing basically on the rocks, and I'm still waiting for those boards to be repaired. So I'm windsurfing on backups, and some of these boards, they're good, but they're not as good as the other boards. And so I'm trying to make them better. And one thing I realized is some of them, the rails are a little bit too hard. And so I've been sanding down the rails, making the rails softer. And it is amazing how much of a difference that makes for the board. And it makes it a lot more surfy. So you could try on one of your production boards. You want to be careful with it, right? You don't want to go crazy on the rails. You don't need to sand very much. And you don't want to sand too far back because you want to have like from the front of your back's foot strap back of the board, you do want a pretty hard rail so you can get up and go and get planing and all of that. But from that point forward, you can sand it down. There is an art to sanding the rail down. You don't want to sand it just if this is your edge, you're not going to just put the sandpaper like this, because then you'll create a bevel. So you want to do it on a 45-degree angle. So like if this is kind of the board, it's like this is the bottom of the board and this is the rail. You can start with a block, so you have a block with sandpaper, and you can just go and do kind of swooping motions on a 45 over the rail, and then maybe come back and go the other direction as well. Or what I did the last time I did it on my board, which was a few days ago, I took the sandpaper and held it on the rail at a 45, went up the rail like this, then changed the direction, did it the other way. And I'm not an expert. I'm not a board shaper. So I'm just experimenting and seeing what works. So if you go to a shaper, they might be able to soften your rails for you in a way that you're more happy with, if you don't really want to just experiment. And it doesn't take a lot, it takes like one little up and down, and you've already changed the board a lot. And it's a nice change. So when you make the rails softer, it makes it easier to get onto the rail, so a little bit easier to initiate a turn, and it also makes it easier to stay on the rail. So it makes it so that you can hold your carves better. So it's a bit more of a surfy feeling. The trade-off would be that you should lose a little bit of speed when you're getting around. I haven't actually noticed that with the amount that I've taken off on the rails, and I do notice a big improvement on the wave. So it's something that you can try. So Andy, I would try it, if you're willing to try it. You don't want to sand too much as well that you're going through any glass. So the boards, like they've got a layer of like hot coat on the outside. I don't know if all production boards are the same, but there should be a little bit of layer that you can play with, that you can take off. We're just talking about the tiniest bit, right? We're just talking about taking off that little edge, but you don't want to go through glass. You don't want to go through carbon. So be careful with how you do it. And theoretically, if you want it hard again, you could go to a shaper and get harder edges put on the board again. They can just put some hot coat and put a harder edge. There's a conversation in the chat between Rasmus and Hans about thruster fins, and windsurfing is more of a sort of a 2+1 setup. What we call a thruster is more like a 2+1. And I feel like in windsurfing, we need that setup. So a thruster setup for me, a real thruster where the fins are more the same size, feels too skatey in windsurfing. It feels like you're not able to get as much drive as you need from the board. Yeah, so Hans is saying not to sand behind the front foot. So I'm sanding back from my front foot. But what you want to do when you experiment on something like this is go really gradually. and it depends on the board. And you can have a shaper do it, and you want to start. So the point that Hans is making is a really good one. Is you want to start more forward and see how it feels, and if you like it, you can come a little bit more back. I definitely would not go behind the back foot strap. And then in terms of the front foot strap, yeah, that you can also not go behind the front foot strap. Again, we want to do these things kind of gradually, so that you're not wrecking the board. But it's definitely a way that you can customize your board and make it more surfing. And it's amazing how big a difference it makes. All right, we've got a video from Hans. Oh, hey, Dennis. Rasmus, I'm not sure what the question is. Why not research how else to do this? What is that talking about? Are you talking about sanding the rails, or are you talking about the fins? Okay, so we've got another video from Hans about the fast tack. This is a very, looks like you're almost complaining out of that thing. Very fast. It almost looks sped up with the video. I know it's not. Great. Oh, so Rasmus is saying about getting thrust from the board. I think it depends. I think it depends on the board. Like, I would say that my boards are pretty thrusty, my Hokipa boards. For the conditions in Europe, I think it depends on the waves, because maybe you're also riding different waves. Like in windsurfing, you're probably riding a lot of the time mushier waves, not always, but mushier waves than you could surf, which I think is maybe one difference. But yeah, that's a good point, and I find it interesting. So, all right, Hans has a tip for the tacks, and I like it, which is to transition sooner. So instead of waiting too long to get around, he starts going around while the board is still carving, and I think that's a great tip. And it's something that you can do. Yeah, it's something that you could just incorporate into your sailing. And one thing that you can always remember is if the board's not all the way around, you can still sail, on the other side of the sail backwinded, sail on the lee side. And that's also good practice. That's something that we do on the master classes. We try to work on lee side riding, backwind riding on the waves. So you don't have to get the board all the way around, but you do want it pretty into the wind to make that easy, but it doesn't have to be all the way around. Hey, Edward. All right. There was, and somewhere in here in the comics, all right, let's see. There was a video from Jeff. Yeah, okay. So Jeff posted this video of attack and falling. And I feel like I've seen this before. I feel like we've talked about this before. But let me just go through this kind of quick. So the biggest thing I see here, Jeff, is it looks like you're rushing through the middle of the tack. And what this is important with tacks. This is a mistake that I see often, is rushing. And you want to keep it slow, keep it smooth. There's a saying, I think it comes from the Army. It's like, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So it's faster to go slow and smooth than to try and rush it like this and fall. So you can really take your time. I mean, it's cool to do really fast tacks, and that's something to work on and work up to. But until you're landing them consistently, slow it down a bit, take your time, get backwinded on the sail. So instead of trying to sheet in so quickly on the new side, you can backwind it and balance on the board. There's a few other things going on with this tack. But I think, Jeff, I think just slowing it down a little bit, focusing on being smooth, will go a long way, and trying to get balance before you think of sheeting in. And so you can lean against the sail, push against the sail to get balanced. And let's watch this one more time. I think you can also exaggerate or keep the sail. There's something a little bit weird. Hey, Nicola. I think there's something a little bit strange going on with your hands here. It looks like you've got both hands on the mast at one point. So I like this front hand below the boom on the mast. But then you put the other hand on the mast and the other hand on the boom. I would keep the technique I like for the tacks is you have that hand on the boom, on the mast below the boom. That's your front hand. Go into the tack, so you're opening the door, and then you close the door, and then just grab, so your arms cross and just grab the boom on the new side. And I think that leads to a lot less fumbling. So you want to get that cross in your arm, I think that's a better hand transfer. So I think one is slow it down, get it smooth. But two, I think that the way that you're doing the hands is not optimal, Jeff. So you want to get that cross. So you're going from holding on to the mast to the boom on the new side. And that will give you more control in this moment. And also it gets you off the nose of the board. There's a few things going on with this tack. Jeff, do you have more tack video that you can submit? Do you have more tack video to submit? We are talking about this on the stream. All right, let's move on. All right. So Rich, thank you for posting this about your forward loop journey. So this is great for everyone interested in learning forward loop. Check out this post from Rich. Super cool. I love seeing stuff like this where there's a success, and not just a success, but you're able to record or capture or share that journey of the success. That's super cool. So what worked for Rich? The number one thing he puts down is filming himself, and then talking with other people, the community. So when I did the forward loop course last year, and we're going to do another one, should do one this year, though I think, actually, speaking of tacks, I think the next online course that we're going to do is on tacking. The forward loop course, we're going to do another forward loop course, but I think tacking is something that's really important. There's a lot of people interested in. So I think the next course that we're going to do is on tacking. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then going step by step to gain trust without any rush. This is also something that I really agree with, Rich. You want to go step by step, so you're never taking one big leap. So for the forward loop, a lot of people talk about just getting over that fear factor and just pushing yourself over the edge. And I don't agree with that. I think that you can learn it step by step. So by the time you're throwing the loop, it's not that you're taking this big leap of faith through fear or whatever. You're just taking the next step. So next, Rich says, do it on a soft or breaking wave for a clear focus point. You can mentally prepare the jump, not some random chop like I did last year. This is a great point, but that is not easy for everyone. Not every location has easy ways for jumping. So there are places that are easier than others for sure. And this definitely helps, but some people are stuck with the chop that they have. And the last part was to really commit and not have half commit. Keep hold of the boom. Yeah, cool. Rich, I'm stoked. Dan asked, do you guys know if a sail has two options for rigging, 400 with 32 extension, 430 and 2 centimeters, and they are said in that order on the sail's details, would it be better? Which one? And it's a 5-6 combat. Dan, I don't know. I would try both. I think with these things, just try both and see. So go out and try to do it in the same day. So go out on the 430 and then come in and re-rig it to the 400. You know, it takes 10 minutes or something, and then you know the best setup for you on that sail. So Caro makes a really good point. The 400 is going to be softer, but maybe you don't want the sail softer. Maybe you want it stiffer. I don't know on the 5.6, the 430. It's a good question. I think there's two ways to approach this, or how I would approach it. One is like what I just said, which is maybe what I would do, where I would go out on the 400, try it for 20 minutes, come in, re-rig on the 430, try it for 20 minutes, and then go back to the 400. And that would give me a pretty good idea of which mast I like better in that sail. And then I would just use that mast forever with that sail. The other method, because I think it's not going to make a massive difference, is to just choose one and forget about it. And you don't have to worry about it from now on because they both will kind of work. 32 is a lot of extension. So you've got to make sure you have an extension that can do that. So yeah, those are my 2 cents. Either go really into it and test which one is better. Otherwise, just choose one and just don't overthink it. All right. This is an old post, but we've got a new comment. James is saying, interesting comment, Jeff. I'm at 98 kilograms on 113 liters. He's trying to use too big of a sail, and my fin configuration is wrong. Gear tuning is required. All right, James, I hope you figure it out. All right. Yan is asking about storage and sailing in the wall versus cabezo. There's a lot of good answers here. We got 27 comments on this thread. I really like staying around cabezo. And for me, that's optimum. And there's a few different storage options there. And I find it really easy to sail down to the wall and then back up again. And I find it more difficult to sail from El Medino Bay up to the wall, and then especially up to cabezo. It's a really long sail. Well, it's not really long, but it's pretty long to go up from El Medino Bay up to cabezo. Easier to the wall. So I find storage around cabezo to be a lot easier. The caveat there is that there are going to be some days where there's maybe big shore break at cabezo, and if you're not comfortable launching at cabezo, even if you're going to sail somewhere else, you might not be so happy with your choice to store your gear there. So it depends a little bit on your comfort. So like for me, there's not really a level where I'm uncomfortable launching at cabezo or sailing at cabezo, but I know that's not the case for everyone. And so you've got to figure out what your comfort level is, and let us know what you choose. Rich is saying shorter mast is softer, better for lighter riders. A lot of extension is a weak point of possible breakage. Yep. Agreed. All right, Nick is on a journey to get a camera so he and Paul can film each other. I want to know what you got. Let us know what you get and how it works. All right, here's my post about competition, which we're going to get into. I want to close on this topic because this is a long topic. So let me just check if there's any other coaching posts. Mark posted this about the BWA events that are coming up. Sounds like there's a few people who are going to go, so that's super cool to see. Marine has got a post about this cutback. All right, so let's do the cutback. Just checking, making sure there's nothing else that's lost. This getting lost behind here. So we talked about these from Caro last week. I don't think we talked about this video from. All right, we did talk about this stuff. Did we talk about this video from Marine? So we've got these two posts from Marine, and then we're going to start talking about competitions. Oof. Can we make this bigger? Yeah. All right, let's turn off our sound. So Marine is one of the rippers of our group. She competes on the world tour, and she was on our very first windsurfing masterclass in Denmark. All right, let's see what's going on here. I love the speed. I love the carve. Your writing's looking really good, Marine. So one of the things that's going on here, so you got a lot of good elements happening. There's a lot of good rail work. I like the transition rail to rail. And this is a kind of turn that can be difficult. This is looks like a beach sandbar break. And the wave, which looks like it's happening here, can kind of jack up and dump at the last second. It can get quite steep because it's shallow here on this sandbar. And that can make it difficult to fit in your cutback, especially with a long windsurfing board, because then the curl of the wave gets quite dramatic and you've got this small curl and it can be hard to fit in that big board, which it kind of looks like that's maybe what's happening here. So there's two different approaches to this. And so the first is a technical approach to changing the technique. And if you want to change the technique, you want to really focus on getting more back on the board and carving more on the tail of the board. Like really think more on your back foot. Think about with your head instead of looking down the line, because the wave is already broken down here. So you don't need to really think about that. Look, I don't think you want to look too far up the line because that can break your body into two pieces and you don't have as much power then pushing through your whole body for the cutback. But you can look somewhere like here and really get low, get that butt low, focus on getting the back of the board on the rail and getting that engagement to carry through on the cutback. Okay, so that's one approach to this section. That's the technical approach. The second is just timing. So you could do the exact same technique that you're doing here, but really focus on getting that high five. So the high five is one of the concepts that returns again and again in our coaching. And basically what that concept is as the wave is breaking and it's pitching forward, you want to get the bottom of your board so that it gets that high five with the lip as the lip pushes forward. And you get then the projection, the transfer of energy from the wave into your board, into the board speed. And so you're a little bit off from the section here. So it's like you need to be a split second, a half second later, or half a meter farther down the line, and probably a half second. Both would work, but probably a half second later is probably the better option because then you don't have to do such a long turn. But you could also extend your bottom turn just a little bit more and hit this section. And when you do get that high five and you hit that section, you'll get some more projection, and that energy of the wave will transfer more to your board, which will push you more in front of this curling section and more to safety, and you'll have more speed coming out of it as well. So those are the two approaches to this kind of section. I think going a little bit later probably is the answer. I also like going later because then it forces you to do a tighter turn. So you're doing I really like the technique here. You're on your rail, you're carving, you're going rail to rail quite well, but you're doing quite a long bottom turn because you're trying to get to this section way down here. And even with that long bottom turn, you're still a little, just, a half second too early there. So going a little bit later will force you to go more vertical, and will provide a little more vertical, a little bit shorter bottom turn, and gives you a better opportunity for that cut back. All right, we've got another post from Marine, and then we're going to get into competition, elements of competition. Big topic. Rich is saying that some brands like Ezzy allow a mix and match of tops and bases. Yep, and we do that because we think that we can get a mass that's better fit for the sail that way. So like Rich says, a 400 base and a 430 top creates a 415 mast. But I'm not sure if you can do that with all brands. It depends on how they're breaking up the mast, where the ferrule is, I guess. But you can, on ours, that is something you can do on any sail. All right, so we've got this question from Marine about cutbacks. All right, I'm trying to crack the secret of the stylish 180 turn cutback with spray and all, but I just don't know how I can actually do it. I put this sequence of Timo Mullen in Ireland in one of his impressive turns because watching his photos made me realize the kind of trajectory you need to have. However, he doesn't seem to do much. The gear turns around him. I guess everything feels natural with a good bottom turn with lots of speed and good placement on the wave as always, but I feel that there's also some work to be done with the heels, the board angle, when putting the rail in the water, the body weight distribution. I tend not to complete the turns, resulting in falls in the waves. Lacking flexibility in my waist is probably not great either. With my new boards, it demands more technique than my old one, putting my weight on the front leg, but I end up sliding and falling. I'll leave the more vertical top turn for another post. All right, so let's look at this sequence from Timo. So he's got good timing here. All right. All right, we've got then the video that we already talked about. These pictures are a little bit out of order. So I'm not sure, Marine, exactly what your question is about the kind of cutback. So if you're in the chat, if you could clarify, that would be really helpful for me. One of the things that can help your cutback, how I understand the kind of cutback that you want to do, is when you're coming out of your bottom turn. So I'm doing it Hokipa style. So I'm bottom turning going this way. What you really want to do is bring that sail across your body. So you get this kind of S in your front arm. And that helps you to get a little bit more vertical, helps you to wind up for the cutback, depower the sail. It's doing a lot of good things. And so getting that little bit of wind up before your turn will be really helpful. Rasmus makes the point that Timo's not really turning, he's sliding a tail waft. That's also a good point. One of the things that I look at when I'm critical of my own riding or different pro riding is the travel of the whole unit on the wave. And so if you're just pivoting on the top of the wave, that's not as impressive as a turn as if you're doing the turn and carrying the whole turn down the wave and continuing the carve then to the bottom of the wave, sort of top to bottom riding. I'm not sure if that distinction makes sense. I'll try to find some of my own footage to show that. So like what I really don't want is a turn where I stop. And then the second thing I don't want is a turn where I just stay sort of pivoted on the top of the wave. Like I want to be traveling as a unit with my board. Hans is saying that a lot of boards seem to slide out more easily, especially with front foot pressure. That might be the case. I'm not sure with all the different production boards. But anyway, Marine. So one of the things that will really help with any cutback is getting that little wind up. So if you're coming on the Portex side, you're going to your bottom turn, you're coming up the wave, and then you bring that sail across your body. So you're bringing your front hand towards the tail of the board, kind of, and you get that, that S in your arm, and that's doing a lot of good things. You don't really need to know all the details of what it's doing. Just focus on doing it, and you'll notice an improvement in your cutbacks. And then otherwise, just really getting your butt low and focusing on getting those heels engaged to get that rail engaged. Yeah. All right. I think that's enough. Marine, let us know in the chat or the comments if that answers your question at all or not. So let's keep that discussion going. All right, now let's talk about competition. So a lot of you guys want to compete, and that's cool. So let's talk about competition, and I'll give some advice, and we'll have a conversation about it now. And this conversation can be ongoing. So especially once you guys do some events. So for example, this BWA event that's coming up, I'm sure that before the event, you've got a lot of questions, but then after the event, you're going to have hundreds more. One thing that was mentioned in another comment thread is you want to have a good watch. I think the best watches for windsurfing wave events, it's a model. Oh, I don't have it with me. It's in the car. It's made by what is that store called? It's like a kind of a discount sporting goods store in Europe. Why am I blanking out, guys? What's the name? Discount sporting goods store. They've got a blue logo. Decathlon. So Decathlon makes these watches, and they're like 20 euros, but they have the right function that you want for wave sailing. And so what that is you've got a timer, which you put your heat length, and then there's a rest timer. So normally you have your heat, which is like 12 minutes or 14 minutes, and then you have a transition, which is maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And so you set the primary timer for 14 minutes, and then you set your rest for whatever the transition is, 2 minutes. And then at the beginning of the day, when they start the event, you start it and you have it on repeat. And so then that timer is just always running for the whole day. And so you always know how much time is left in the heat. And so maybe your heat is 6 heats away, and okay, I've got 5 minutes left in this heat. And then after that, I've got, 5 heats, and then it's me. And you can then have a really good idea of not just the timing for your heat, but the timing of all the heats, which makes it a lot easier. So getting a good watch like that. So that's I think the best watch for windsurfing competitions. It's this one that Decathlon makes, and I'll find it and take a picture of it. And I guess I could do a little video about using it, the functionality of it. Otherwise, you can just use a timer or a stopwatch. You have to do more mental math if you're doing it that way, because then you have to calculate, okay, how much time is it until my heat? When, it's like, what I like with the repeat countdown is that you set it at the beginning of the day, and then the timing of all the heats throughout the whole day, which makes it a lot less stressful. Philip is saying, quick question about mass mixing. If mixing different top and bottoms, is it better to go for 370 bottom and 400 top, or 400 top, 370 bottom? Great question, Philip. And what we recommend with the Ezzy mask is to go longer top, shorter bottom. So stiffer top, flexier bottom. And that's something we recommend. It's something that I I use in my sales. So that would be, if you are mixing, I would start with that. But like all of this advice, I would also experiment. See what you like better. It's I think a good exercise to do that gear testing because it brings you closer to your gear, makes you understand it better. But if you don't want to do that, just go longer top, shorter bottom. Um, so that works. All right. So Lena asked about the best advice for refocusing, and this is such a good question and such a deep question because once you lose your focus, how do you bring it back? And there's a lot of different techniques for this, and different techniques will work for different people. For me, breath work is the answer. Um, so focusing on my breathing, oops, um, or doing specific breath exercises like box breathing. Um, and the breath, focusing on the breath is really helpful for calming yourself, controlling your with your breath. You can really change your I don't know what the right word is for this. There's a certain word for when you're able to sort of you're changing something in your body. So like for example, if you are hyperventilating and getting a lot of oxygen into your system, then you excite your body. And then if you're breathing slow with less oxygen, then you're calming your body, right? And you can really actually change how your body's working by how you're breathing. But for focus, just focusing on that breath, in, out, and it helps to do the breath work before the event. And this is going to be a recurring theme. Like all of these tips for competing, you can't just start them for the first day on your first contest. In order for them to work, you have to train them and work on them before the event. So then when the event comes, you're comfortable implementing them and it just feels like a normal day. Yoga is good for breath work because yoga is very much connected to the breath if you're doing it properly. But I think focusing on the breath, doing some breath exercises, those are good ways to refocus. You could also have like a little mantra. I know some people like music, so some competitors have headphones and they're listening to music. I don't like that. I feel like for me, the music brings me out of my focus, brings me out of my body, and I want to, yeah. So anyway, so I don't use the headphones or music when I'm competing. Maybe a little bit in the morning, but not when I'm not like in between heats. Um, all right, so Andy's saying that competing really helped him learn a lot so quickly, and that is definitely true. It can really help push you. Um, so he recommends doing it, seeing if you like it. Some people will like it, some people don't. Some people find it stressful, some people find it fun. Um, yep. Cody asks, what's the best wave event for a first competition? There's a few good answers in here. I would love to organize an amateur wave event, something like the Deafy Wind, um, but for waves. So if you guys don't know, the Deafy Wind is this massive race in France that gets 1,000 people racing at a time, which is super cool. And I'd love to figure out what the equivalent of that is in the waves. It's a bit more difficult to figure out that format for the wave. So if you guys have any ideas how to do a big group event or an amateur event, let me know, because I don't think it's the double elimination or the single elimination, because there's too much waiting around and not enough active time on the water. And I want it to be fun. I want it to be challenging, but also fun. So If you guys have an idea for format, let me know. Carl asks, how do you stay calm when you did not find a wave to jump on the first 2 runs? This goes back to the breath work. Focus on the breath, helps you stay calm, helps you stay focused. Stina says, I'd like to be good at competing, but every time I compete, I get nervous and do not sail my best, which is frustrating and demotivating. And this is a huge part of what makes competition hard. And so like I already put an answer in here. And I think that one of the most important points is realizing that competition is not about deciding who's the better windsurfer. It's not about who's the better wave sailor. It's not about who's the better windsurfer. It has nothing to do with your ability as a windsurfer. It has nothing to do with who you are as a person. I think, on one level we think, oh, this is going to affect how people think of me as a windsurfer. And then on another level, we think, oh, this is going to affect how people think of me as a person. And it's just not any of those things. Windsurfing in a wave event is its own skill. And there are elements of windsurfing ability that are important to do well in a windsurfing event. But it's really important to recognize that it's different, that it's not the same thing. So what does that mean when it's different? It means that, because you always want to be powered up when you're sailing in a heat. So it means that you need to train on and get used to sailing on bigger gear. You need to get used to riding on bigger boards. You need to get used to riding on fully powered sails, maybe even sails that are a little bit big, because it's so bad to be underpowered in the heat that you always have to err on the side of having a little bit too much power. And so, like, for example, Robbie Nash is famous for riding big boards all the time because that's what he needed in the competitions. And so you don't want to just take it in the competition because that's what you need in the competition, because then you're not used to it. So what that means is, okay, if you're going to be fully focused and dedicated on competing, it means you have to ride that big board all the time so that you're used to it. And so that when you go in the competition, it's just what you're totally used to. You've learned how to make it work. So riding that big gear, learning how to sail powered up. Also, I think this is also important to remember, is that it's not, just because you think it's cool or the beach thinks it's cool doesn't necessarily mean that it will score well. And so it's really important to communicate with the judges at whatever event you're at about what will score well. Are they looking for a lot of different moves on the wave, 1 or 2 big moves? Are they looking for vertical turns? Are they looking for aerials? Are they not looking for aerials? And that communication is really important. I see some people frustrated with judging at all levels of events. And the reason they're frustrated is that they didn't understand what the judges wanted to see. So maybe they were doing aerials when the judges were looking for vertical turns. And so that communication is really important. And this is a subjective sport. And so if you want to do well in an event, it's about aligning what you're doing on the water with what the judges want to see. And so that communication is really important. Going to the skipper meeting is important. Talking to the judges is important. Figuring out what they want. And normally at an event, there's a head judge who can communicate that to you. And this is so important. And the more amateur the event, unfortunately, the more chaotic the judging is. So like on the world tour, we have it pretty well defined for each day what the judges want to see. If you're going to your local event, which maybe has volunteer judges, it might be less defined. And that can be frustrating. Just try not to get frustrated. Realize that people are volunteering their time to judge and just try to have fun with it. Dana, hello. So Dana says that the Pistol River Wave Bash is happening in June. Is anyone going? So this is a really fun event. Really fun place to windsurf, and maybe I could make it. I'm not sure. June is a little bit of a tough time to head to Oregon, but it's a fun place to sail, and it's a great experience. It's starboard tack, kind of onshore, gets very windy, great jumping, very fun side onshore wave riding, and so it's a place that I really recommend visiting if that sounds like fun conditions for you, and maybe this is the time. The US is now opened up more with COVID stuff. So if you're coming from outside the country, it could be a fun experience, a fun excuse to visit the Oregon coast. All right, so let's move on to. So then I also mentioned that you should train heats. So again, if you really want to focus on competing, if you just want to go and have fun, um, that's also fine. And I think one of the biggest things biggest mistakes that I see for first time competitors, and this is where sailing 1 or 2 practice heats might be helpful for you before doing a real heat for the first time, is thinking that the heat is too short. And so just trying to catch a million waves in the first 5 minutes. And instead of focusing on getting quality waves, just catching just a lot of shit waves and then not doing well because of that. So it can be good if you do that practice heat where then you see how long 14 minutes actually is on the water, what that means in terms of catching waves. It can calm you down in the heat. And the question about how to stay calm, how to stay focused, the more you prepare and the more that your everyday training is similar to the competition, also the easier it is to stay calm. And yeah, so if you're this, I want to just kind of reiterate this point. Most wave events, they count 2 or 3 waves. So you really just want to focus on catching the 2 or 3 best waves of the heat. It's so much about wave selection. And so these events, and this is another reason why I say that it's really not about wave riding technique or windsurfing technique. And for sure, windsurfing technique plays a role, but competition is not just a judge of that. It's a judge of a lot of other factors that are really competition specific, or at least more weighted in the competition setting, which is why you see great windsurfers like Levi Cyber who struggled to do well in competitions because some of these other elements were maybe not what he was focusing on. He has had a couple good results in his career, but he's really struggled to get the results that a lot of people thought he should have got. And the reason for that is that he was focused on his technique, focused on his riding, and maybe less on these other things, less on riding big gear. And then the point that I'm leading up to is that it's so much about wave selection. So these heats, these contests are almost wave selection contests. Hey, Owen. And so if you're on the best wave of the heat, it just offers you more potential. It offers you more scoring potential, offers you more sections, and it's bigger, longer, better wave, which then just looks more impressive. So it's doubly better. It's better because you can do more on it, and it's also better because it looks more impressive. So these events, wave riding events, the number one thing you want to focus on is getting the best waves of the heat. So just taking your time, being patient, and getting the best waves of the heat. If judging is counted in the event, then you want to get your judges early. I'm sorry. If jumping is counted in the event, you want to get your jumps early. And the reason for that is often you want to be a bit more upwind for jumping so you can get speed. And then if you get your jumps out of the way in the first few minutes of the heat, you can spend the whole rest of the heat looking for those 2 best waves to ride. And so that's a good strategy when jumping is counting. So you get the jumping out of the way early so that you can focus just on the wave selection, because wave selection really is 90% of doing well in a wave riding event. It's the same or similar with surfing as well, with the WSL. Wave selection is really, really key. And it's even more important, I think, in windsurfing than in surfing. So it's really a lot about wave selection. So you can do just the way that the judging works. You can do, 2 turns that are 10 times better than whatever the other competitor is doing. But if they're on a bigger wave and they do 5 turns that are worse than what you do, that 5-turn wave, by most judging standards in windsurfing, is going to score a lot higher than the 2-turn wave, even though the ability demonstrated on the 2-turn wave was way, way, way higher. And that's just kind of a fact of windsurfing competitions. And maybe that will change someday. Maybe it's different for your event, but that seems just to be how it is. So that means focusing on wave selection is huge, which means that you don't want to just catch a lot of little waves. You don't want to get frazzled. You want to be calm. You want to be patient and ride in on waves that will offer you the most scoring potential. So try to get the 2 or 3 best waves of the heat, the best sets of the heat. All right. Sophie says, what do you guys do to get less nervous when competing? And do you have any advice for having consistency in your moves, except, of course, doing it 1,000 times? So we've already talked a little bit about being less nervous. So the 2 main things to be less nervous are breath work, so working on your breathing, and then the other one, and this one is huge and often overlooked, which is training how you would be competing. And so if you're not super serious or focused on competing, you don't want to make a career out of this, but you do want to compete a little bit, then you can do this. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can do, just a little, integrate this a little bit. But basically what you want to do is live how you want to be competing. So like when I was super focused on the tour, coming back to the tour a few years ago, so I'd taken a break from the world tour and then I came back and I came with a lot of competitive drive. I tried to remove all variables. So it made my training the same as it would be for competing. That means that I wake up at the same time. I don't drink any alcohol because I don't want to be drinking alcohol during the competition, so that I'm not drinking alcohol. Otherwise, I traveled with the same bed sheets. So I had the same bed linens that I traveled with. So if I was staying in a hotel or an Airbnb, I would take off their sheets and put my own sheets on. So I have the same sheets. I would eat the same foods that I expect to eat during the competition, during the training. Sail with the watch, sail with the right wetsuits, the right, overpower the other sizes to make it so that when I'm in a heat, it's what I've been doing the months before. So it's nothing new. Like one of the things that contributes to being nervous is, okay, you're in the heat, you're wearing a watch for the first time, you've got the timer going for the first time, you ate whatever dinner because you thought that was going to give you the most energy the day before, but you're not used to it. All of these things where you're dealing with the newness. But if you can deal with all of that ahead of time and you're training and living how you want to be when you're competing, then it's not new. And I think that's quite an effective strategy. And then in addition, working on the breath work can really help with the nerves. And I think with those 2 things, it really goes a long way to dealing with the nerves. All right, how do you get consistent? So doing a move 1,000 times is definitely a way to get more consistent. Also watching yourself, so seeing footage of yourself, going through coaching like we're doing here in this group every Sunday and during the week in the Facebook group helps. Footage is a big one. If you can just do any of these things, seeing footage of yourself. If you can see footage of yourself every day, every session, you'll improve a lot better, a lot faster, and get a lot more consistent with your moves. Rasmus says, some good advice is being at an event to watch the top windsurfers live makes you understand and appreciate their skills, especially the top dogs are amazing. Yeah, it's difficult, you see this like 12 minutes or 13 minutes and you see someone, me, Brasinho, whoever, going out and struggling to make a back loop and doing some wave rides and think, oh yeah, like I can do that. But it's so difficult when you've got difficult conditions and to fit in, okay, your 2 jumps and 2 waves, and you want to get backups of all of those in that heat, in that moment, in those 12 minutes. Yeah, it means that you have to be, in order to do well, you have to be really, really consistent. Greg says, how can you eat the same thing when you travel to the opposite sides of the earth? So then you can bring food with you. So I know like Kevin Pritchard, for example, used to travel with like peanut butter jars when he would travel around and eat just a lot of bread and peanut butter. When I'm competing, I really like to eat the Cliff bars. They provide me good energy without making me feel too full. And so I'll travel with a bag of Cliff bars. And then, I like at those times I would have like a kind of a simple breakfast, maybe just some eggs, some boiled eggs, And then, I'd have the Cliff Bars while I'm training during the day. And then for the dinners, I'd be making kind of my own, there's a kind of a mix of foods that I would eat, whether I'm in Spain or Germany or wherever. Which I guess the point is that for the competitions, it's not really opposite ends of the earth. It's Canary Islands, so Gran Canaria, Tenerife. We were going to Denmark at that time, and Germany, Hawaii. You can get pretty similar food there. Or going to Japan. I mean, I've done a lot of competitions in Japan, and I love Japanese food. So, like, Japan is maybe the exception where I'm not really eating the same food, but I love exploring Japan and Japanese food. And when I'm there, I'm less focused on winning the event. Though I have won that. They do an international event there, and I won that. I can't remember how many times I've won that. I won at least once, maybe twice. I've had a few podiums there, which is really fun. That was like one of my first good results against the top guys. Like I remember the year I won, there was Victor Fernandez there, Danny Bruce, Camille Juban. Omazaki is a very fun spot to sail. All right. Mark says, how do you deal with inconsistent conditions that the first round are sent in when you're part of them and not a lightweight kitty guy, but the others usually are? This is also a good question. You need to do well in competitions. You need to sail in shit conditions, full stop. So if you want to do well, if you want to compete, and it's something you really want to focus on, you have to train in bad conditions. And so that means training when the wind is light, training when the waves are small, when it's mushy, when it's gusty, when it's inconsistent. And just expect that you're going to be put out into those conditions and expected to compete and do your best. So it means sailing in those conditions. So it means that when you're training, when you see conditions that you maybe don't want to go out in, you need to go out in them. And I was having this conversation with Ben Prophet just the other day. You see a lot of guys like maybe Branzino or me or someone else who maybe don't want to go out if the conditions are inconsistent, but don't think that was always the case. Like when we were younger, we were sailing in those shit conditions all the time and getting used to it and going out and training and putting in the work. And even now still will. So I think it's a mistake that sometimes the up and coming kids make, the windsurfers. They see some of the older guys maybe being a little bit picky with the conditions, but that wasn't always the case. Mussolini is a good example of that. Like now he only sails if it's good. But when he was coming up, he would sail in everything and everywhere, and that really helped to train him. So you've got to put in the time in these inconsistent conditions, and then have the gear for it. So if you're not really light, then you need to get big boards and big sails and get comfortable riding them. Yeah, this is a good point from Tristan. Samuel asked, is it fun? It can be. I think you should try it, and then, yeah, maybe you have fun, maybe not. Tom says there are not many competitions, but he does want to compete. Yeah, so there used to be more competitions around. I remember there were some amateur events in the Canary Islands in the summer and other kinds of events. I mean, there definitely are some, as you can see in this group. There's, the Danish event up in Klitmøller. There are the BWA events. So there are events happening. It'd be cool to have a calendar of them. So if someone wants to create a calendar and post it of the amateur events in Europe, that would be cool. And like I said, I would love to be involved in the organization of a kind of event, some kind of DEFI event where we're getting a lot of people together and having fun. So there is the competitive element, because I think that can be motivating and pushing, but I don't want it to be too much. I don't want people to be disappointed that they're not winning or not doing better, because that's not what I want. There are events that already exist for that. So anyway, if you have an idea about a format or a location for that, I mean, probably the easiest location is somewhere in the Canaries, because the conditions are so consistent. So that would be cool. I'm not sure how feasible something like that is to organize. Not being from the Canaries myself, I don't know the details there, but it's something that I could look into, maybe in Tenerife or Pozo. I know some people there that can organize events, but I'm not sure about the format. I think just porting over the normal single elimination, a dingle or double, is maybe not the best strategy. I'd like to figure out a format that works with more people on the water at a time, kind of like the Defi. So if you guys have ideas for how that could work, let us know, and let's make it happen. All right, cool. Are there any more competition-oriented questions? If there are, I'll answer them now. Otherwise, post them in the group, and we can talk about it next week through the week, because there's so much to talk about with competing. We touched on a few key points, but there are so many more things that we can talk about. Cool. All right. So if you guys have any more comments, I'm just writing a note. I'm going to do a decathlon watch video. So Mikkel is saying, what about a pop-up contest that happens when the conditions are there? I like that. I like that a lot. I think the challenge is for most of the people that work to take the time off to make it happen. But maybe we could do something just really small, low key, something in Denmark. Maybe there's the option to do that. Just a fun contest, just for fun. Because I don't want it to get too competitive where then people are disappointed and hard on themselves. So it's just enough competition to push the level and get people out of their comfort zone, but not competitive enough that then people are sad. Caro, I also would love to see more down the line events. I think that would be cool to see. All right. So if you guys have ideas, post them in the group. You can write me directly. Otherwise, I think I'm going to sign off unless there's any more questions. I can hang out for a few more minutes. So you let me know if there are anything else that you want to ask or talk about. But otherwise, we'll see. I think there's no wind today. And the waves are small, which means maybe I'm going to get the snorkel gear out and try to find my the Insta360 camera that I lost yesterday. And it's such a shame because I got some really good waves with it that I would love to share in the group. I had some aerials. I was using that new harness mount. Yeah, so. Mark, yes, the Decathlon watch does have audio beeps. It's a really simple watch. It's like a 20-euro watch or something, but it does everything that you need for windsurfing competitions. And it's the only watch I've found that can do that. The closest thing otherwise are those big round sailing watches, which you see the racers wear. And those watches are good. I find that they're difficult to keep on when you're wave sailing. But the Decathlon watch has even more functionality than that. They're pretty close in terms of functionality, but has even more. All right, we've got a couple quick questions before I log off. Facebook user is saying that there are some events in the Netherlands. These events. John asks, next week we're on daylight savings time in Europe. Are you going to stay on 8 p.m. Central European time? I think so. That is the plan. And then at some point we'll switch to 9, or we could switch to 9. I think last year we did switch to 9, and then we switched earlier to 8 in the winter. So maybe we will switch. But what do you guys think? For me, it's probably easier to switch to 9. Hawaii doesn't change the clock, so that would mean that then it's the same time for me. Otherwise, I'd have to start doing it an hour earlier. But what do you guys think? What's easier? Ragnar says plans for Klitmøller. Yeah, we could do something there when I'm back in Europe. Let's see. So this was the harness mount from the company Harness Mount, and I like that it was stiff. I like the length of the rod, like the distance of the camera to me. I felt like it didn't get it in the way a lot. In general, with the harness mounts, I've felt like they really get in the way of the sailing, and that's frustrated me. Whereas this one, I felt like it wasn't jiggling around a lot. It felt like the camera was stable. It wasn't impeding my windsurfing as much. It's still kind of annoying. But then the rod fell off. The carbon rod fell off. So not only did I lose the rod, but I lost the camera, which sucks. So I might go swim for it today. And there's like a leash system that I tied to the camera. And so I had the camera tied, but then that tie also was secured where the rod was secured. So when that failed, the leash also came out. Where there's maybe a better way to tie the leash. I'm not sure. There's not really instructions that came with it. I got it. It's a French guy that makes them. And I don't know. I'll reach out to him and see if he has any ideas. I think in general these things should have more instructions. And I was going to do that. I was going to make a video about, which I guess I could still make, about the whole process of setting it up, drilling it into the harness, all of that. Okay, cool. What else before we sign off? This is again in the Netherlands. Rasmus is saying we should switch to 9. Switch to 9. Yeah, okay. Let's do 9. Sounds good. I'll do an announcement for that. When does the time change in Europe? What's the day? What's the day that the time changes? So I know. Is that before next week Sunday? I guess I can look it up as well. All right, guys. I'm gonna sign off. Have fun. Have a good week. Windy week. I hope you get on the water. Let me know how your session is. Post in the Facebook group. You guys know, where's the Facebook group? There's the Facebook group. You guys know where it is. And take care. Have a good week. Bye.